A single African-American father drove his drunk boss home after a corporate party. When she woke up, she coldly said, "Did you think I wouldn't find out? A man like you in my house, taking advantage of my vulnerability." 34-year-old Marcus Williams, a single father to an 8-year-old girl, sat calmly at the executive desk, showing no surprise. He had been a senior analyst at the company for 5 years, always impeccable in his reports and respectful to everyone. He never thought a gesture of kindness would turn into an accusation that could destroy his life. "Miss Reynolds, you were extremely intoxicated last night. I merely drove you home safely, as any decent person would," Marcus said. Victoria laughed dismissively, her blue eyes sparkling with coldness and calculation. "Oh, how convenient! A helpful employee offers to drive his drunk boss home, and then, well, we all know what men like you do when they think no one is watching." The insinuation was clear and venomous. Marcus felt his blood boil but remained calm. He had noticed subtle signs of Victoria's bias over the years. Veiled comments about how lucky he was to work at such a prestigious firm, condescending glances in meetings, and how she always meticulously scrutinized his work while accepting mediocre reports from white colleagues without question. "I'm sure there's a misunderstanding here," Marcus said in a calm voice, hiding the storm within. "There's no misunderstanding. You invaded my privacy, humiliated me, and now you will pay for it." Victoria leaned forward. "I'm considering reporting this as sexual harassment. It's your word against mine, Marcus. Who do you think they'll believe?" Silence hung in the air, like a palpable threat. Marcus looked at the woman who controlled his professional destiny, observing how she savored every word, every moment of power over him. She didn't know that he had recorded every second of that night, from the moment he found her crying in the company restroom to driving her home, meticulously documenting every respectful gesture.
"What if I told you I have proof that nothing inappropriate happened?" Marcus asked quietly.
Victoria laughed. "Proof? What kind of proof could a man in your position have against someone like me?" Marcus simply smiled. A smile filled with years of patience, strategy, and an intelligence that Victoria completely underestimated. He knew this moment would come sooner or later. People like her always showed their true colors when they felt completely in control. While Victoria continued to talk about consequences and resignations, Marcus thought about his daughter Maya, waiting for him at home, about the injustice she faced every day, and about the plan he had begun to formulate long before this conversation. The rest of the story. Victoria wasted no time spreading her version of events. The following Monday, Marcus arrived at the office and noticed strange glances, hushed whispers, and a cold atmosphere that hadn't been there the previous Friday. She had sown toxic seeds of mistrust with surgical precision. "Marcus, we need to talk," Jennifer from HR said, appearing at his cubicle before he even turned on his computer. "A formal complaint has been filed against you." Walking down the hallway, Marcus noticed colleagues averting their gaze as if he were contagious. Victoria had carefully chosen her words, avoiding direct accusations that could be easily refuted, but making insinuations serious enough to permanently tarnish his reputation. In the HR office, he saw Victoria, seated like a queen on a throne, surrounded by 2 corporate lawyers. Her smile was predatory, full of the confidence of someone who had never lost a corporate battle.
"Mr. Williams," Jennifer began, with an awkwardness, "Miss Reynolds alleges that you behaved inappropriately when you drove her home after the corporate party. She has compromising photos."
"What photos?" Marcus calmly interrupted. Victoria handed her phone across the table, showing a picture of herself lying in her bed, slightly disheveled. "You put me in a vulnerable position, Marcus. A man alone with a defenseless woman." Marcus looked at the photo with clinical interest. "Interesting. Who took this photo?" "I did, when I woke up and realized what had happened," Victoria quickly replied. "Ah," Marcus said, making a mental note. "The first documented lie." Victoria didn't know that Marcus had grown up in foster care after his mother's death when he was 12. 5 years in troubled foster homes had taught him to document everything, not to trust authority, and always to have an escape plan. Later, serving 4 years in the military and using his benefits to pay for college, he mastered strategy, patience, and the importance of thoroughly studying one's adversary before attacking. Now, as a single father to Maya, a brilliant 8-year-old girl who was the purpose of his life, Marcus had honed the art of anticipating problems and defending against them, especially in a corporate environment where black men were often the first casualties when things went wrong.
Mr. Williams, Jennifer continued, do you understand the seriousness of the situation? We're talking about a possible suspension without pay during the investigation.
Of course, Marcus replied. And I assume Miss Reynolds's word is considered more credible than mine?
Victoria leaned forward. Her eyes gleamed with malice.
Marcus, you're a good employee. Always have been. But men in your position sometimes get confused about boundaries with successful women. It's quite understandable.
The condescending tone of her voice was like a slap. Marcus felt a familiar sensation, the same one he felt when social workers spoke about types like him, when senior officers in the army doubted his leadership qualities, when college professors were surprised by his high grades. He quietly reiterated, "You know, I'm a single father, came from where I came from, working here at our charitable organization." Sometimes lines get blurred when there are significant differences in status. The silence in the room was deafening. Jennifer felt uncomfortable, but the lawyers remained stoic. Victoria, meanwhile, clearly reveled in every word, every moment of humiliation she thought she was inflicting. Marcus thought of Maya, who had asked that morning why he looked worried. "Daddy, are you okay? You always say good people win in the end." He smiled and promised her he was, and that good people always find a way. "Miss Reynolds," Marcus finally said, "may I ask a question? The night of the party, you mentioned something about your former assistant, Sarah Chung. You said she tried to play the race card when she was fired." Victoria tensed slightly. "That's irrelevant to our discussion." "Oh, but I think it is," Marcus replied, "because Sarah came to me last week. He's suing the company for racial discrimination. He says he has some very interesting recordings of conversations with you." Victoria's face paled, but she quickly composed herself. "Sarah is a disgruntled employee making up stories. No one will believe her." Marcus smiled again, the same smile filled with years of careful preparation. "Perhaps you're right, Ms. Reynolds. After all, who will they believe? The word of an Asian woman, or a respected white executive like yourself?" The irony was not lost. Victoria realized too late that she had fallen into a verbal trap, using the very argument that now turned against her. "What are you trying to say?" Jennifer asked. Marcus calmly stood up. "I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just observing how some people believe their word is worth more than others based on characteristics that shouldn't matter in a professional environment." As he left the room, Marcus heard Victoria whispering furiously with the lawyers. She didn't know that for the past 2 years, he had meticulously documented every questionable remark, every microaggression, every discriminatory decision she thought too subtle to be noticed. Every condescending word she had just uttered was recorded by a hidden app on his phone. Every expression of superiority was captured. Every indirect admission of bias was now digitally preserved. Victoria also didn't know that Marcus was not just a senior analyst. He held a master's degree in information systems and had cultivated a network of contacts, including investigative journalists, civil rights attorneys, and corporate activists who thrived on exposing executives like her. Most importantly, Victoria had made a fatal error by threatening not only his job, but his ability to provide for Maya. And when you threaten the daughter of a man who has already lost everything once and rebuilt his life, you awaken a force that cannot be contained or controlled. That day, while Victoria celebrated what she thought was her easy victory with the lawyers, Marcus was at home, helping Maya with her math homework, meticulously planning every move in a game she didn't even know she had lost the moment she completely underestimated the intelligence and preparation of the man she tried to destroy. Victoria wasted no time solidifying her perceived victory. On Tuesday, Marcus was officially suspended without pay for inappropriate conduct under investigation.
On Wednesday, she circulated a confidential memo to other executives about the need to monitor employees who might exhibit questionable behavior. On Thursday, Marcus received an official letter from the company demanding he not enter the building until further notice. Victoria didn't know that for the past 3 days, Marcus hadn't been lamenting his situation, but executing the first phase of a plan he had been developing for months. His first call wasn't to a typical employment lawyer, but to Amanda Rodriguez, a racial discrimination attorney who had built her career exposing executives who believed themselves above the law. "Marcus Williams," Amanda said with interest when he introduced himself. "Sarah Chung told me about you. She says you might have valuable information about some practices at your company." "I don't just have information, Miss Rodriguez. I have proof," Marcus replied. During their meeting at her office, Amanda meticulously examined the carefully organized files on his laptop. Detailed spreadsheets showed how Black and Hispanic employees were systematically given lower performance reviews, passed over for promotions, and had their work scrutinized far more often than white colleagues who performed worse. "Impressive," Amanda whispered, examining the data. "How long did it take you to compile all this?"
2.5 years. Ever since I noticed this pattern," Marcus said, opening another folder. "But this isn't even the most interesting part." The screen displayed screenshots of private WhatsApp conversations between executives, internal emails with racist comments disguised as cultural concerns, and most devastatingly, a 23-minute audio recording of a leadership meeting where Victoria and others openly discussed how to manage diversity without lowering standards.
"How did you get access to this?" Amanda asked, clearly impressed. Marcus smiled for the first time in days.
Let's just say when you work in IT for 5 years before becoming an analyst, you learn a few useful things about corporate systems. And when you're constantly excluded from important meetings, you find other ways to stay informed. Meanwhile, Victoria was celebrating in her office, calling other female executives and boasting about how she had dealt with a problematic employee before he became a bigger issue for the company. She didn't know that her every word was being recorded by a monitoring system Marcus had secretly installed months ago. "The problem with people like him," Victoria was telling Margaret Thompson, a director at another branch, over the phone, "is that they don't understand boundaries. They grew up thinking they deserve the same treatment as people who have actually achieved something in life." On the other end of the line, Margaret laughed. "At least you handled it before he tried to play the race card. These things can drag on for years." "Exactly," Victoria replied. "That's why I acted fast. A single Black man versus a respected white woman. The judicial system is more sensitive now. But the reality is, reputation still matters." Marcus listened to every word through the system he had set up. Every comment was automatically transcribed and time-stamped. Victoria was digging her own grave and didn't even realize it. That same day, Amanda called with news. "Marcus, I have something interesting. The Department of Justice is investigating discriminatory practices in large corporations. Your company is on the list of those under preliminary review. This means your evidence won't just help with your employment lawsuit. It could be the missing link in a much larger federal investigation." While talking to Amanda, Marcus glanced out his living room window, where Maya was doing her homework at the kitchen table. She had asked why Daddy was home on a weekday, and he explained he was handling work matters. "Everything will be okay, Daddy?" she had asked with that insightful look children sometimes have. "Yes, honey, sometimes people think they can hurt others without consequences, but the truth always comes out." Maya smiled and returned to her math problems, reassured by her father's promise. This confidence fueled Marcus's determination. It wasn't just about him. It was about creating a world where his daughter would never have to accept being treated as a second-class citizen. "Amanda," Marcus said, returning to the phone conversation, "there's one more thing I need to show you." "What?" "A recording of my conversation with Victoria yesterday. All that talk about men like me and status differences, it's all documented, including the moment she admits to having planned this situation from the start." Amanda was silent for a moment. "Marcus, do you understand what this means? It means she's not just committing discrimination. She's orchestrating a conspiracy to harm an employee based on racial prejudice, and was foolish enough to admit it on tape." "Exactly.
And that turns a simple employment case into a federal criminal charge. That night, as Marcus helped Maya with her civil rights history homework, she asked a question that momentarily took his breath away. Daddy, why do some people think they're better than others, just because of their skin color? Marcus carefully chose his words. Sometimes, Maya, people who've never had to fight for anything think their easy lives make them special. They forget we are all equal. And what do we do when we meet such people? Marcus smiled, thinking of Victoria celebrating a victory that would soon turn into her complete downfall. We prove them wrong with intelligence, evidence, and always by doing what's right. Victoria also didn't know that Marcus had been building a network of contacts for years, including investigative journalists, civil rights activists, and even employees from similar companies who had faced discrimination. His suspension from work freed up time to activate this network, as he couldn't do so while working full-time. On Friday, as Victoria dined at the city's most expensive restaurant, celebrating her effective management of problematic personnel with Margaret Thompson, Marcus was on a video conference with representatives from the Department of Justice, presenting evidence that would turn Victoria's life into a legal nightmare from which she would never awaken. For a moment, as Marcus turned off his computer after the meeting, he allowed himself a satisfied smile. It wasn't a smile of vengeance. It was the smile of a man who had finally found the perfect moment to let justice prevail, a man who understood that patience and preparation were worth more than 1,000 angry words, and that sometimes the best response to injustice is to give the unjust enough rope to hang themselves. Monday began for Victoria. The usual premium coffee, executive meeting, lunch with investors at noon. She was reviewing presentations when Jennifer from HR appeared at her door with an expression Victoria had never seen before. A mix of panic and disbelief. Victoria, we have a problem. A very serious problem. What now? Has Marcus hired some cheap lawyer trying to stir up trouble? Jennifer closed the door and approached the desk. The FBI is in the building. They want to talk to you about systemic discriminatory practices. Victoria's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? There's a federal investigation underway. It appears someone has provided extensive evidence of racial discrimination within the company. Recorded conversations, internal emails, manipulated HR data. Jennifer paused, watching Victoria's face turn pale. His name is at the center of it all. At that moment, the door opened and 2 federal agents entered. Behind them was the company's CEO, Mr. Davidson, who looked as if he had aged 10 years since the previous morning. Ms. Reynolds, the lead agent said, flashing his badge. I'm Special Agent Carter from the Department of Justice. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your management practices. Victoria tried to remain composed, but her hands trembled slightly. Of course, but I don't understand why this is necessary. Starting with that conversation, the agent played an audio recording on his tablet. Victoria's voice clearly filled the room. The problem with people like him is that they don't understand boundaries. They grew up thinking they deserve the same treatment as those who have actually achieved something in life. Victoria's face turned ashen. That was taken out of context, she began, and then another audio clip played. And a single black man versus a respected white woman. The judicial system is more sensitive now, but the reality is, reputation still matters. Mr. Davidson stood up abruptly. His voice trembled with anger. Victoria, for God's sake, tell me you didn't say that! But the worst was yet to come. The agent handed a stack of documents across the table. These are transcripts of your phone calls over the past 6 months, all legally obtained via court order based on a detailed complaint of systemic discrimination. Victoria flipped through the papers with growing horror. Every racist remark, every discriminatory decision, every conversation in which she revealed her true prejudices was documented with date, time, and context. Who provided this? She asked. Mr. Marcus Williams, along with evidence that you orchestrated a false accusation against him solely based on racial grounds. The agent showed her more documents, including security system recordings that proved it was she who took the compromising photo at her home 3 hours after Marcus safely drove her. This revelation struck Victoria like lightning. Marcus had documented everything. Every movement, every conversation, every moment of that night. Security cameras in her own building clearly showed timestamps of the photos she had used as evidence.
Furthermore, the agent continued, we have records confirming that you illegally accessed the HR system to alter the performance reviews of Black and Hispanic employees, lowering their scores to justify denying them promotions.
Mr. Davidson stood up. His voice trembled with rage. Victoria, you have compromised the entire company, our government contracts, our reputation. You've ruined everything.
Can I explain?
There's no explanation.
The CEO turned to the agents. She's fired. Immediately. The company will cooperate fully with the investigation.